As the Abbasids moved to the east, that they started to conquer people who were of Turkic descent, and that was introducing a kind of a new ethnicity to
Yes.
the mix.
And that's the Saljuks. So Salahuddin,
Yeah.
by the way, is Kurdish,
Okay,
and the Saljuks are of Turkic background.
okay.
Yeah.
So my question then is more about the, as they spread into the Persian Empire, wasn't that also a conflict of ethnicity, especially since there had been such a long history of fighting between those regions? And was that hard then for the people of Persia to adopt Arabic, let's say?
That
and
was
to
the
then-
Umayyad Revolution.
Okay.
The Umayyad Revolution is, that was really came down from, when you're talking about coming down from the areas, we can go to this map still. So the Umayyad Revolution, although this is the Seljuk rule that you see, so it comes down from this area. So this is all Iran, right? So that was, in a sense, the tension between the first major ethnic group to kind of be the second major ethnic group of Islamic history was indeed the Persians.
Because I know that
but it's
Persian
very
sense of
early.
identity is really...
Oh, very, 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 very strong. And even, I mean, the Persians, well, today we think of them as Shiite, and that has to do with the rise of the Safavid Empire. But actually, I mean, Al-Ghazali, Muhammad Al-Ghazali, is Persian through and through. Many of the like Al-Farabi, who we just saw, he's Persian. Ibn Sina is considered the greatest philosopher of Islamic history. He's Persian. Many of the greatest scholars of Islamic history, especially in the foundational period, are actually Persian.
And was that, I mean, that conflict, which obviously has existed in different ways throughout time, was that a big deal then? I mean, were they reluctant or did they resist just because of that ethnic difference?
It's a very big deal when it comes to the Abbasid Revolution, but at this time, not really.
Okay.
One of the things that happens under the Seljuks that's very interesting is that under the Seljuks is the period when we actually start to have major intellectual works written in Persian.
Okay.
And so it's the beginning actually of the introduction of Persian as the second major universal language of Islam. Because when you get into Islamic learning down in Mongol India, it's in Persian. Persian is the lingua franca of Mongol India. All scholars have to know Arabic as well, but the real language of intellectual discourse is actually Persian. So it's the tension is not the way that we think of it today. The tension that we think of today comes about because of this. It comes about because of the Ottomans versus the Safavids. Mm-hmm. All right, the Safavids actually chose to be Shiite. They chose to be Shiite because they didn't want the Ottomans to rule the lands that they had taken over.
And that almost sort of configures the conflict that had predated Muhammad. I mean, in terms of territory. Or is
Yeah,
it really...
it's actually it does. I mean, the Turks, the Ottoman Turks rule the areas that are that the Byzantines had ruled before, and the Safavids rule in the area that the Sassanids have. That's why my students always write Safavids when they mean Sassanids and Sassanids when they mean Safavids. And when I'm tired, I sometimes make the same mistake. But yeah, no. So it does, in a sense, reconfigure that. But the Safavids really chose, and they actually used some of the same strategies that the Seljuks used. The Safavids actually brought Shiite scholars from all parts of the Islamic world into the city of Isfahan, and they used that to kind of establish their credentials and to really create a strong Shiite identity within the empire at the time. And it was another place where scholars could be paid extremely well for their work. Let me go to a map here real quick. So this is kind of what you're asking about. This is the Safavid Empire. All right, here you have the areas that were in constant dispute with the Ottoman Empire. Over here you see them going down into where the Mongol Empire is. And these are also areas that were in dispute with the Golden Horde that was up in Russia, in these areas. Here we have these are known as the Great Gunpowder Empires. Right? Of course, the Mongol Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. And this could really be said to be about what Islamic rule in the world looked like. Of course, you've got some other somewhat independent, like Morocco is for the most part independent of the Ottoman Empire, though they will read the khutbah in the name of the Ottoman Sultan. But here, I mean, the idea of caliphate, like the Abbasid Caliphate, has gone. The Ottomans never really paid much homage to it. 1517 is when it's completely gone. Moguls, they don't care for it at all. And of course, it was a Sunni empire, so the Safavids don't care for it at all. But this is really the kind of the situation before the time when colonialism starts to enter into the scene. And this is the Mongol Empire at its height. All right, and so we're talking about 1707 is the time when the Mongol Empire reaches all the way down almost to the very to the very south of India. But this is the part where they ruled for almost all of their time. But again, when we get to the 18th century, of course, the British come in and the decline starts to occur.